Truth and Tea with the Urban Evangelist. Welcome to Truth and Tea with the Urban Evangelist.
Hi there. It's always a pleasure to welcome you back to the Truth and Tea podcast, conversations that are filtered through faith. I am the Urban Evangelist. We are tackling a very important topic, one that, we usually circle around a lot because it's awkward for some people, it's uncomfortable for others, and sometimes people just do not know what to say to the next person. The topic is permission to grieve. If you have suffered the death of your spouse, you've probably experienced one of the most painful and disorienting experiences that life can offer. When couples tie the knot, the goal is to become one flesh until death do us part. How can the pieces be picked up, however, when fulfillment of these vows occurs through death? While I cannot begin to fathom the immense void our guest today must feel, I've been blessed to see her strong faith sustain her through this deep valley in her life. She has a peace about her that surpasses all understanding, and I know that I and a lot of others have witnessed the incredible beauty that's been born out of the loss that she has experienced. She's allowed her faith to guide her and give her strength, while her own children, whether biological or those of the faith, have drawn so much inspiration from the wounds that she has managed to turn into wisdom, and the pain which she's still sifting through, but she's turning that into a whole lot of purpose. Joining me today is Pastor Gladys Paswani, and it's always a pleasure to have her. Thank you so much. Welcome to Truth and Tea.
Thanks for having me, Maimba.
You look lovely in your blue.
Thank you.
Popping so well.
Thank you.
And ever radiant. I don't know how you do it, Pastor Gladys. I'm just going to start there.
You want an answer to that?
Well, you could give
it could be, I think it often sounds like a cliche, but it's the glory of God. I think that we don't realize how much is in our alabaster box, that when we're broken, there's so much beauty that radiates, and it makes us tender, it makes us less careful, careless, and it beautifies us.
I like that, alabaster box that's broken and just radiates.
Radiates,
glory. Pastor Gladys, it's been almost 4 years since your profound loss.
And
has it gotten easier to answer the question, how are you?
Well, easier in the sense of I know that it's not easy to answer the question because I think some of the difficulties were in being asked in the early stages and trying to figure out, okay, first of all, how do you answer this question and how am I really doing? But I think that now, even though I'm not always sure how I am, I'm more confident to say, I'm figuring it out, or there's a new dynamic. It could be in parenting, it could be in purpose, that I'm still learning how to maneuver without my spouse.
Right,
yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah.
And even in the beginning, when we experienced the loss, I would fumble at that question as well.
Yeah.
And sometimes you almost, double check and you begin to really think through it, like how am I
really doing?
Really?
Yeah.
You had said something behind the scenes. I'm sorry, I was paying attention.
Right.
Coming through some curveballs here and there during our conversation. You took some time to just pamper yourself, whether it's a long bath, your bath salts, your bath oils. And she said you're looking to, is it clean?
I think society does put certain expectations, and it's all a coping mechanism, right? Because grief is what we go through at an individual level, but it's experienced by the whole community. It makes communities uncomfortable, and so they need for things to be functioning a certain way to bring some level of comfort, both to themselves and to their responsibility over their loved ones. So you can imagine, for my aunt, being a very significant person in my life would have been the one who would answer for the to the family how I'm doing. And I guess sometimes when we pick up, people don't realize how hard it is to pick up, so they look more at how we look from the outside, and then that's left to interpretation. Oh my gosh, she's bathed, she's moved on already, or she's gotten back to work. She must have gotten over it, and it's what makes it difficult, and hence permission to grieve. Yeah.
Do you think that the fact that people kind of trying to find telltale signs externally without realizing that the internal part of the healing process will last, for a long time, long before or long after I can put a smile on my face.
Yeah. Look, it's a whole process. You can be laughing one day and crying the next. So permission to grieve is really about saying you're going to authorize yourself to go through this process, no matter what it's going to demand of you on any given day. And so I think that what can prolong the process of recovery is trying to live up to certain expectations. Now, please don't get me wrong. I know we come from a society where we are highly accountable to our elders. But I think that there's still a lot to learn, even from the wider community in, what grief actually looks like, that it's more than what meets the eye.
And I just want to take you back to, again, an experience that was very close to my heart.
Right.
I think it was the day of the burial of our daughter.
Right.
And for the life of me, Pastor Gladys, I think I was like in a trance. I couldn't cry that day, despite the numerous weeping and sobbing behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But to some people, that was perceived as I didn't care that much.
Yeah.
Perhaps because it was a stepchild, that's why I didn't cry.
Yeah.
Have you found yourself in instances where you've had to deal with very probably harsh opinions?
I did. And I think that it hit me very unexpectedly because I guess, we don't plan for loss. There is no good day to lose someone you love. Even if the person has been sick, even if the doctors have told you that we have just but 24 hours, nothing prepares us to say goodbye to a person you've expected to live with for the rest of your life. So you don't have the tools. You don't go into that day equipped for what might come at you. So I think it's a big shock to the system because, like I said, you don't prepare for it. I mean, I had my fair share of experiences. I mean, everything from, just the transition of what it looked like for me to enter society as a married woman and then not realizing that I would be perceived differently as a woman who has no husband. And I remember one incident, and I hope this doesn't make anyone feel bad because, I must say, even in my book, I've really highlighted a number of stories, but it's really with the spirit of wanting to help people. But I remember being at an event that I think it was maybe going into maybe the 8th month since my loss, and I really had to show up for this event type of thing. And I remember getting there and a group of women said, Gladys, your seat is right at the end there, because we need to keep you away from our husband. I cried all the way home. I just did what was expected of me. I couldn't wait to leave that place, and I literally sobbed all the way home, Look, there are just so many incidences that have taken place. But I think that it also just helped me to understand that grief requires us to forgive every day. You wake up every day and you say, I choose to forgive. Because I think society is still, like I said earlier on, trying to figure out how to relate with a grieving person. And so sometimes in that process, there's a bit of carelessness. Another story, because I don't want people to think it was just that one incident. I don't want people to think that Pastor Gladys walks on this red carpet every day. I remember a really wonderful servant of God who had, I think it was within the 3rd month, brought over some groceries to the house. And you know how loss is in our African society. People are bringing groceries all the time. Somebody's sending talk time because we are a people that looks out for our own. And I remember that day that I then called his amazing wife, just even though he had dropped off the grocery, I really just wanted to say through the wife, thank you so much for thinking about us, and just really going out of here, because I was overwhelmed with just the love and support that I got, and I still, get to have. And that conversation went south because when I said thank you, she says, oh, she says he bought groceries, so how did he know you needed groceries? Is this the first time he's bought you groceries? So for him to bring you groceries, what had you said? And so for the first time in my life, I found myself in a place where I was carrying the image of that woman who people have to, put their husband, the woman at the well. I was like, but that's not me. So while I was experiencing the loss, I was also experiencing rejection. And some stigmatization as well. And for a while, it made me a bit afraid of, I would look at my phone ringing and I would be so afraid. And I must say also with this servant of God, he had no intentions. It was really just, never got a call or anything out of order. But I had to then now begin to give myself the permission to reintegrate with society while understanding what society goes through in such times.
And did that reinforce for you the fact that obviously others are perceiving you differently? Women folk, on the other hand, could see you now as a single woman. That is a threat. Has there been that shift in some of your relations with people, with couples?
Yeah, I have some beautiful, healthy relationships, and if anything, a lot of our friends have really reeled in to be more supportive towards me, and will often invite me, oh, we have this family thing going on. So I have received a lot of love and support. I think sometimes the misunderstanding happens from people who see you from a distance. So perhaps they don't really know your heart, and also sometimes people are referencing a current situation based on some history as well. Like I said, everybody's trying to figure it out. To be honest, there were times where I remember back when I lived in Zimbabwe, I think I must have been in my 20s, which is a long time ago. Trust me, it's long. I remember attending this conference. It was a women's conference. And I don't know why I remember that so distinctly. Even before my husband passed, that's one of the things that hasn't left my mind. But I remember it was a women's conference, and the speaker got on and she was warning all the single ladies, and she said, you single ladies must know how to conduct yourself, those kind of messages and stuff. And then she says, and you widows, you need to be able to hold yourself. We know you're thirsty. But and I thought, whoa. I didn't really get what it meant to be a widow, but that just never left me. And I think that there's a lot of carelessness around loss. It's just like even orphaned children. Sometimes we introduce our biological children and then we say, oh, this one I'm keeping. And I just wonder what it sounds like to that child who's been kept.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. There's a lot that obviously has been unbundled as you've gone on in your journey.
Right.
What I want to ask is, when we make vows, like I said in my introduction, we make them until death do us part.
Right.
And I think it's only after I heard a sermon at church that, I realized when a spouse dies, it's actually a fulfillment in one way or another of that vow that you made, because for sure now death has, separated you.
Right.
It's a life-changing event, but I've noticed that change is something that you have said in your own words. You have given change a chance.
Right.
What does that look like for you on the other side of, I made my vows, I saw through, he's not here anymore. What does life look like for you now?
Yeah. So I think the first part of it is in maneuvering the loss, there's the experience of, okay, I don't get another chance to cook for this man. Did I serve him well? You start to think about things that were pending. So it's a reflective moment, and you're thinking, okay, did I do well as a wife, as a partner, as a friend? Did I fulfill what was required of me? And I think this is why it's so important to deal with things or issues around regret and where people start to blame themselves and things like that after loss. So it's that reflection point. So I think there are many conversations that one has to have with themselves. So it's just about saying, I did the best that I could, and just allowing it to rest that way. And then, of course, the whole process of then having to let go, you're in denial because you're thinking to yourself, wait, does it just change overnight just like that? You're learning how to truly let go, maneuvering or trying to navigate around what it means to be truly separated. I remember, one of my coverings, Father in the faith saying, look, you have to understand that you can't love someone who can't love you back, and they were really just trying to address the emotions that I was holding on to, and said, think about it, right? You can't love someone who can't love you back. While he was here, yes, he loved me completely, but now he can't love me back. So it's those things that you have to confront. And I think it's all part of the letting go process. And then, of course, moving forward. I always say we move forward, we don't move on, because I think that so for someone like me now who's in their 4th year of having lost my spouse, there are a lot of conversations around, so, what are you thinking, or it's been a long time and things like that. And then the dating space. Yes, the dating space, like moving, you're still young and all of that, and maybe certain, and then of course a fair number of conversations around, I just don't get married, you're serving the Lord so well, I think you should just continue to serve God. Wow. So already people have moved you to a certain space now where they determine that, okay, I think it's time you moved on, or it's time you don't move on. So you notice that every milestone to your process of grief has got some kind of work, some kind of change process to navigate, around that, yeah.
You just opened up so much to me right now. Mm-hmm. Primarily the fact that permission to grieve has been a very central theme in your life, so much so that you are putting most of what we're discussing and then some in your book.
Yes.
Why is that so important for you to give permission to grieve? And someone sitting on the fence might be like, who am I getting this permission from?
Right.
Who am I seeking it from? So a little bit more about that.
Mm-hmm. So thank you for asking, particularly the first part of your question. In why it was important for me, I describe myself as a mentor leader. I think mentorship is at the heart of my life, and my life has always been the resource that I use to help other people to learn in real time things that they probably haven't even encountered yet through what I'm going through today. And I think that's the gift that mentorship will bring. In fact, the initial title for the book had a subtitle. So it was always Permission to Grieve, but the subtitle was The First 90 Days. Because I guess like in those first 3 months, I was like, whoa, this is something, like this is stuff. Where do you learn about this stuff? Like, where's the manual for grief? It turned out to be so complicated because I went into that space kind of feeling like, I'm Pastor Gladys. I know how to do this. I understand pain. But then I realized that this is so complicated. So I thought, okay, look, I've got to put this in a book. I need to be able to put this out there for someone else. Because also when you've experienced loss, there's some integrity behind how you help other people. You don't just look at somebody who's experienced the loss of a spouse, a child, a parent, those significant losses. Not to say the others are not, but I'm just saying that, you're not going to look at that person and say, oh, no, it should be fine. Like, don't worry, you'll be fine by next year. Or, there's more integrity because you know that it's going to take a while before they're okay. And in fact, what does okay really mean? We have to redefine all of that. So that's why I put out the book. And then, of course, I'm so glad that I took some time before, getting ready to publish, because I realized that it was such a learning journey. And if I had published the first 90 days, honestly, Mainza, it would have been the most misguided tool.
You mentioned 90 days and you were in writing mode.
Right.
Now, from the outside looking in, you always look so well put together, emotionally, spiritually, just from a holistic perspective.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel lost in that 90 days?
Yeah. I felt lost every day.
Every day.
Yeah, the Bible says that He gives strength to the weary. So if you see a strong person, you better know that they receive that strength in their weariness. And so I went from every emotion you could think of. All my faculties were challenged, spirit, soul, and body, There were times when my body just gave in. There was a time I thought I must have a heart condition, and I realized that, wow, the heart actually does break, Yeah. I used to sleep just 2 hours, and in the second hour, I would wake up in a fright, and until I became afraid to sleep. Emotionally, I would wake up feeling like today's going to be a good day. Come midday, everything is falling apart. And when you talk about, being well put together, I think this is why it's so important for us to process grief. Because of its complexities, there are so many moving pieces around it. So you never just say, okay, this is the angle I want to take. No, you have to allow every aspect of grief to be a part of your process, and that requires the responsibility you have to start the physiotherapy of your grief. Okay, get up, start, get back to work, do some work, take a walk, take a bath, start the processes around change, because I've met a lot of people who wouldn't allow themselves to adapt to the change, and they fell victim to the change they didn't adapt to. But there is also the aspect of taking care of yourself. So all those baths, salts, and the oils that you were talking about were just for me a coping mechanism, and because also there's the need to value yourself when you have lost greatly. The other thing also for me is purpose is a driving factor. And what purpose, the greatest tool that purpose will give you is that it takes pain as a raw product, and then when it's processed, it gives you your work. So I wouldn't be a resource in grief had I not experienced it. So it's what I did with the experience that allowed me now to be a useful resource, to be able to package and distribute it.
Wow,
yeah.
Incredible. Oneness in a marriage is what we strive for when we come together. And I know, from a romantic love perspective, we say my better half or my partner, my husband or my wife, they complete me.
Yeah.
At the point of separation, like due to death, did you feel like you've lost half of you? Did you still feel complete?
Yeah.
And then doing away from everything that you did as one to now it's just me and the kids.
Yeah, I think that's such a good question, Mainza. So I always say to people so first of all, let me just say this. First of all, when I started writing the book, it was about loss. It was about death. Okay. But I started to understand that grief is about loss. Yeah. So we experience loss at different dimensions, right? So like turning the stove on to 6 as opposed to it being on 1. So a person loses a job, they lose an opportunity at that lower range, you heal quicker, but it's all grief, it's all loss. But when it comes to marriage, because of the covenant, the one flesh covenant of marriage, where it says the two then became one flesh, right? Genesis 2, the two became one flesh. So the truth of the matter is that you get married and that person you're married to becomes a part of you. So sometimes I laugh when I hear people saying, be your own person in marriage. Like, we have to put that into its right context, right? Because I'm just like saying, you're a parent, but do you? You pretty much know that, okay, doing me is pretty much doing my whole...
It's a context for me as well.
Right? Yeah. So, So when you're thinking about like being you, is in that season that you are married, is like, who am I in this union? Who am I as a parent? And then again, now when loss happens, you have to revisit, who have I become without my spouse? And I think that for me has been a big part of my journey, particularly over the last maybe year and a half, where it's been a self-discovery journey. And the question is not who was I before I got married, because I got married and the marriage did so much to me that I now have to learn who have I become. And I think it's very important, particularly for those who would like to move on in terms of getting remarried quickly. Like, well, I don't know what quickly is, but you know, anyway, yeah. But for anybody who makes a decision to move on, is that you need to take the time to answer that question, who have I become? Because I've seen a lot of, and I don't know why we've taken it, you know, but I've seen a lot of people who then can't sustain a second marriage because they probably looked at somebody and said, this is the ideal person, yet all they recognized was their medicine for their pain, you know, or they were looking for their missing part. So I think it's important to put into the right context that, have I lost a part of myself, or am I now having to revisit who I have become? Yeah. You know, so you don't go through life feeling like a half, you know.
And that's part of the change that you need to accept.
Yes, yeah. So you're not a half, but you are a complete but different person.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. It's led me to see the importance of processing your pain.
It's a non-negotiable, my
It's non-negotiable.
Everybody must process pain. Yeah.
What's the downside of not being able to do that?
Oh my gosh. You know, pain, if you think of pain, even in the context of like somebody who's maybe had malaria, or for those who had COVID, think about like the time when you were sick. What pain does in the physical, it also does emotionally to us. So pain gives a false perception of reality. So think about it, you were sick, it could have been blazing hot outside, but you were covered in blankets, right. You know, or vice versa. You couldn't eat your favorite food. Sometimes you're in oblivion because you don't even know what time of the day it is. But then what is the condition of the soul when it carries pain? You know, so a lot of people then begin to reframe their entire life. They change their preferences, and it's not really their preferences, but it's pain has preferences, pain has demands, you know, pain has a posture, it even has a language. So many times people who haven't healed become angry, bitter, you know, and let me just even say, as hard as this is to say, that there are many people, particularly who lose a spouse and they die a year later. 2 years later, it happens a lot. So you literally are fighting for your life by overcoming the pain.
When you put it like that,
yeah,
you cannot understate the importance then of dealing and processing. Yeah. When I was introducing you, I talked about how, you know, you continue to inspire, you know, your children, not just your biological ones, but even those of the faith.
Right.
You did ministry with your husband. You're a pastor in your own right, and you're dealing with this profound loss, but then it's double-edged in the sense that your children have lost their father, and there's a ministry now that is without its leader.
That's right. Yeah.
I know I will ask, but then I can't even begin to imagine what navigating that was like. Yeah. So if I'm going to break it into two parts, how did you help your children deal with their loss as a mother before we get to the ministry aspect of it?
Yeah. So for my children, I had to understand, so the work began with me first. So I had to understand the fact that while I lost a husband, my children lost a father. And those losses have different consequences, because when we lose a person, we don't only lose the person, but we lose what they represented in our lives, right? So it meant that for my children, they were without their covering, they were without their instructor, and everything that a father, their protector, their coach. They didn't just lose a man, the loss came with that quality, those other, parts to them. And the same thing with me. So my losses also came with its own consequences. So I had to understand, like, what are my children's losses? Because if I looked at them as my losses, I would not be able to help them. But I think that what I would like to focus on more is the conversation we had when we came from Barring. I'm from the Barrel. I remember just moving into a smaller apartment with my children. It was an empty apartment. We just sat on the floor, and I said to them, you know what, you guys, you have the permission to grieve your father, and because, they had come from a funeral where a lot of very well-meaning, and please, I want to say very well-meaning family members said to them, now you've got to be strong for your mother. Now you are the men of the house. I told them, you are not the men of the house. You are my children. Yeah. Growing, yes. New set of responsibilities, yes, but you're not the man of the house. You're not the man of the house. And don't be strong. I told them that nobody in this house is going to be strong for someone else. You're all going to be strong for each other, because if I need to lean on you, you need to be a strong enough pillar, And I said to them, you can talk about your dad when you want to. You can. I told them, I also had to help them understand that, I'm grieving. And you have to let me grieve. And it's not the end of the world if you hear me crying in the middle of because it would be very wrong if I didn't. It means that I am suppressing the pain. So I help them understand that the process is real. I think the complexity was just seeing what I didn't prepare myself for was just realizing that my children were all grieving differently, each of them very, very differently. But one funny story is I remember when I said to them that, listen, you can talk about dad whenever you want to and stuff. So you can imagine when we moved into our apartment, of course it was a smaller apartment. I mean, for my own reason, I wanted a much smaller place, but we still had family. So my younger son was now sleeping in the same room as me during that time. And Mainza, he would play the whole night. He would be playing his father's videos. And so somewhere in the middle of the night when I'm dozing off, I would start to answer back. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. But I said to him that, you know what, play the video and stuff. So I guess we all had to learn how to give each other that space as well to grieve the way we wanted to. So it hasn't been easy. It's been very difficult for my children. I think even they didn't expect some of the consequences along the way, but we've held true to the fact that it wasn't going to be easy, but we are up for the task. And sometimes one of us or a bunch of us are stronger than the one person, and we'll hold up that person in that season.
And then on the flip side, have you allowed them to see your pain as a mom?
Yes and no, because I think that as parents, part of our job is to protect our children. There are some parts of my process I didn't want them to see. I didn't want them to know what I was going through when I was facing some of the societal challenges, because I think that it would be difficult for them because their protective instincts would also come into play. I also didn't want them to now breed a certain level of bitterness towards people. Because, they say true colors come out after grief. And I never wanted my children to go out into the world with that narrative, like, oh, people are now like this. Because, when you love someone and that person is hurt, you're going to pick up, But I had, of course, the enough spiritual growth and maturity to put what had happened into context and in its right perspective, rather, and offer the forgiveness. But I didn't want my children to know about that. Of course, there were some very rough experiences that I did want to protect them from. But there were times when they would notice certain things, and I would say yes, like, this week has been very difficult for me. And I wanted those conversations to be normal. And to know that even if they are hard for them, but they must know that we grieve loss. Yeah.
ministry-wise, how did you pick up the pieces?
Yeah, that was something. That was something because I feel like I was just being a good amaibusa. I mean, it was...
So put things in context for us.
Yeah.
Were you the pastor's wife?
Yeah.
You were a pastor as well?
Okay, so the interesting thing is when my husband got ordained my late husband got ordained in Zimbabwe, the church where we were brought up, they believed that the pastor's wives should go to Bible school. Okay. So I had to go to Bible school as a pastor's wife. Yes. As a pastor's wife, I went to, I had to go to Bible school. Yeah. And then, of course, then the ordination happened at some point later on. But I was never really a church pastor. My husband was. However, as you know, I am involved in a lot of preservation work. And so, of course, the title also then went with a lot of the work that I do as Pastor Gladys. And of course, like I said, I think like 10 years after having gone to Bible school and I started to get certain assignments, I then was ordained as a minister. Yeah, so when he did pass on, one thing I knew for a fact is that I wanted to I wanted to make sure that the church would be okay as well, So I remember, I think in the second month, was it 6 weeks, I took the church through a grief series because, the church, like I said, the church also had its loss, yes. I remember sometimes I would do it shaking, but stuff like that helps me because I'm a public processor. Sometimes the stuff that I'm sharing with other people is really my journey, So it was okay for me to do that. And I guess also part of me wanted to make sure that certain parts of the system don't fall apart because I already had so much recovery to do. So I was trying to hold up what I could hold up. So I felt like if I can help the church heal from this, because my late husband was very present in people's lives, very present. So the loss was very, very real. Our church was a young church, so there were a lot of interpersonal relationships as well. And then, of course, there was the call to leadership as well, where it was like, okay, wow, I'm the lead pastor here, and we have a group of young ministers who are going to need the support as they come into their different roles and responsibilities. And yeah, it's been a beautiful journey pastoring the church, and I'm excited for the young people really taking their place, in the church.
But it can't have been easy. I mean, manning the fort while managing your own pain as well. And you've got people looking up to you,
yes.
Looking for the vision that you're going to pass forward for them. Where are we going after this?
Yes. I remember one of the most devastating moments I had was when a couple left the church after the loss, and they pretty much said, look, one of them said, not really comfortable being pastored by a single pastor. And I was like, but I didn't choose this, But I was so devastated about it. And I would go to church and I would stand there and I think, no, who next is going to leave? And I thought, my gosh, so of course, having heard a statement like that, I started to feel like I'm not enough for the task. And that was very, very hard for me. But of course, I would say with every difficult thing that I went through, I always took time to process that difficulty. Because then it gave me a new way of looking at it. Right now, I understand that, people may leave, and actually we haven't had many people leaving the church. In fact, a lot of people are actually more committed and they've really found their place. But you know what, Mainza, death or no death, people come into churches, they leave churches. I left a church, and stuff. So just about putting it into its right perspective so that pain is not saying to you, this is the end of the world for you, and stuff,
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
What has been the most surprising emotion that's accompanied grief for you? So shocking.
Yeah. After this, I'll probably think of another one because. So one thing I think I didn't see coming was in one of my victory seasons. I had this season where I had so many wins, like my dreams were coming alive, things that I never thought were possible, that I never thought, doors I never thought would open for me, were opening for me. And I hit rock bottom. So I would have high highs and low lows. But of course, being a processor, I was like, okay, what's going on here? And I realized that our victories have people that are supposed to share in them. And when those people are missing, there's a discrepancy there. So I had lost, in fact, I went through consecutive losses in 4 years. So 2016, I lost my mom. 2018, my dad. 2019, beginning of the year, I lost my best friend, Ambassador Brenda. And then at the end of the year, I lost my husband. So it was like blows throughout. And I think while I was going through all of that, in as much as, yes, I had my children, you know, celebrating with me, and of course my church family, my mentees, and the people who love me, even people I've never met on Facebook, on social media, in my inbox saying, you're doing so well, we're so proud of you. Not to take away anything from that, but I looked around me and I said, I would have wanted my dad to see how this all turned out. My dad always wanted me to do school. In fact, he had started to take me on that journey already, 40, but he, you know, and I was like, he doesn't get to see this. And there were just some things that I would have wanted to share with them. So that was a surprise for me. Yeah, that was a big surprise. Yeah.
Bittersweet.
Yeah, bittersweet.
Yeah. I want to now kind of help your theological hat.
Okay.
I find that it's easier, of course, to mourn with hope when someone has died in Christ. But oftentimes, I've got friends, I've got people that have lost a loved one who was unsaved.
Right.
How can they find peace in dealing with the loss, and you know that this person didn't die in Christ?
Yeah.
So how am I to mourn with hope?
Yeah. Wow, Menza, I think one of the key factors to grief recovery is acceptance. Acceptance is required even under, for lack of a better word, the most ideal circumstances around grief, where we can say, oh, this person, you know, we know they're in a better place there, so we can speak of their testimony in Christ. But even on the flip side, acceptance is important, because acceptance is that place where you say, okay, I'm here now and I can't undo this. I can't change what has happened. It's confronting the facts that you cannot change it, because what gets a lot of people into a very destructive space is trying to change what they can't, or lamenting over what they can't change, and that can go on for years and years. And so you're like, oh, you know, maybe I should have. Man, I remember, like, last year this time I was supposed to lead them to the Lord, or we met at a family function. Why didn't I just lead them to? So there's a lot of that. But acceptance says that, you know what, there's no turning back now. So you gather yourself up. In other words, you pick up your mat and you begin to walk forward. And so moving forward simply means that you now have to be able to say to yourself that, okay, they're gone, but I'm here. What do I need to learn? What is my wake-up call from this? Are there things that I need to get right in my personal life? I've seen what it can look like to die outside salvation. Okay, what about this person? What did they have that mattered to them that I can at least pour into? Do they have children? So right now I can reach out to their children. I'm going to commit myself to mentoring those children, to making sure I bring salvation to those children. The tough thing is when death blows the trumpet, there's just no turning back. And so acceptance is the way. Yeah.
How do you stay committed to your healing journey, practically?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you do what's required of you on any given day. So there are times when, so I have this philosophy, rest, don't quit. Okay. I believe most people quit because they don't rest. when they are required to rest, they think it's time to quit. And yet, if they only just but rested, they would realize that what they actually needed was rest. I'm big on rest. Like, I have a spa dates, vouchers. Like, yes, that's my happy. Yes. So I take breaks when I need them. And I think about resting as a public holiday. I know that today I need half a day off. I can't push past this. Because you're asking about commitment, right? Because what gets us to back off or to not be committed are those hard days where we throw in the towel. So rather than throwing in the towel, you rather take the break and you know that, okay, this is half a day off for me. This is a day off. I'm going to take the weekend away. But you do so knowing that Monday you're back on the job of recovery, and so you rest along the way. There are pit stops. There are places of refreshment. There are places where you push blood, sweat, and tears, but God gives you enough resilience to still push. So it doesn't really mean that every time you feel like, this feels hard, you've got to still be able to tap into what do you have that can push you, because productive stress has a productive range as well. So if you can be resilient even in those difficult times, you'll notice that's where most of the supernatural stuff happens. Yeah.
So this one will make you laugh. I've got two final questions.
Okay.
I once came across a comment on one of your posts, under one of your posts, and I've never forgotten that comment. Yeah. So you're looking really lovely, and someone said that their friend was asking if you're ready to date again.
Was that on a post? I don't know how I missed that.
I probably didn't say it, but my turn, I parked there.
Okay. Yeah.
Is remarriage a possibility for you?
Is it? I don't know, Menza. Like, I don't want to say yes or no. Yeah, I don't want to. I love that my father in the faith, very, very early in my grief journey, said, Pastor Gladys, you and your Facebook, you and your setup podcast, I don't want you to start announcing that I will never get married and stuff like that. I don't want you to say that. And I understood that, yes, I can't say it because I don't know. Look, this journey for me has been a journey of many surprises. So who knows, we might get surprised.
And I ask though, do you think there's stigma attached to widows remarrying? Do you think it's more permissible, from a social point of view, for men to remarry?
I think everybody's trying to get the men married off pretty quickly. But I think because of my research in the area of grief, there are many people. I have been able to interview a few men who were not doing okay because the family just said, okay, how do we take care of his grief? Find him a wife.
I see.
And that happens very quickly, yet the men also have a way of dealing with grief. So yes, of course, there are societal expectations, and people have different timelines. They'll say, oh, by this time, you should be. And some people will comment on a post. Others will come and have this, can we talk type of conversation and things like that. And of course, you get the occasional flowers and you get the occasional, secret admirers and stuff like that. But I think it's just important for you to own your own journey and be able to say, because I've been told time will run out before you know it, you'll be old. And I think also because a lot of people who know me well, they know that I love love. Look, I was happily married, right? And I love love. I think companionship is such a precious gift. But I think it's one thing to run for the status, and it's another thing to have the quality of the status, right?
That's right there.
Yeah. So because it's going to...
That goes for anybody really
for any
to get married.
Yes. For anybody looking to get married. So I think that, yes, society will have a voice, but you have to find your voice. You have to find a way to hear, what are you saying? Isn't it amazing that in the Bible, people who got their turnaround was because of what they said to themselves. Mm-hmm. So you have to think about, okay, what I'm saying, am I hearing my parents' voice in this? Am I hearing my children's voice? Am I hearing, what part of society am I hearing? And then how do I continue to learn how to anchor myself well enough to be able to hear my own voice? And if your voice at that point is saying, I don't know, It's okay to be in that space. If you have a green light, it's okay. You know, I say to people, like, I remember someone coming to see me and they were like, they wanted to move on barely a year after the loss. And most times people would be like, what? You haven't even, you know, but then the thing, like, for me is I just think, as long as that person, it just means they have to commit to a healing process. They need to have reached a certain milestone in their healing. And of course, they have to fulfill certain cultural expectations, like putting on the tombstone and stuff. But I mean, if they want to move on, why not? Because it's hard to do life by yourself, right? It's hard. But I must say very quickly as well that I think for me, one of the answers I gave to myself, right, was I want to continue to do purpose, right? And if I meet someone in the purpose field, then I'm good. Doing purpose. If I don't have to come out of the space of serving God, you know, then I know that I'm on some path. And I think no one should go looking. I think you should just focus on purpose. And purpose has many gifts, and I guess a spouse can be one of them. But if not, it's just a few more solo vacations for me.
We'll watch the space.
I'm sure you will.
Before I let you go, Pastor Gladys, if you could just look straight into the camera.
Yeah.
That one.
Okay.
We are dealing with loss, I know, but then the loss that really is specific to you is the loss of a husband.
Right.
And I just would like for you to speak to, you know, another woman out there that has lost their husband, and also as society, because you highlighted so much that's been said carelessly.
Yeah.
What can we do better, you know, to help widows or someone dealing with a profound loss?
Yeah.
It could be maybe a husband who lost a wife.
Right.
What can we do better?
Yeah. Okay, so here's my word to you, and I want to start. I'll start with the second part of Mainza's question on society. I think one of the things I've come to cherish about our African society is that we are a people who looks out for our own. So we are a caring society. We want to know that the people we love are okay. And many times in the process of ensuring that we get certain things wrong, there's certain things that you know, because nobody taught us, so we try our best. And I want to encourage you to say that let's learn this whole aspect of grief. Let's learn it. Let's adapt to the changes that our world faces when it comes to grief recovery. I know that perhaps there are certain norms that might have been there 20, 30, 50, 100 years ago that the world as it evolves have changed. Let's allow ourselves to continue to learn how to support the person who's grieving. And I think that's going to be like an important key to being able to help. So don't be afraid to equip yourself that way. And for those who are experiencing the loss, and I think particularly the loss of a spouse, whether it's a husband or a wife, let's just put it out there. You are going, or you have gone through, one of the most difficult losses one can ever experience. The one flesh covenant is a real covenant. And so the loss is very deep. Knowing that means that you must commit to your healing. I can't say this enough. Your healing is a non-negotiable. I'm not talking about coping. I'm talking about healing. And healing has so many different aspects to it. Why don't you begin your journey? Equip yourself with the resources that you need to heal. You know, we're never the same after loss, but we can learn to live differently. It gets better as we heal. God bless you.
Spoken so gracefully, as always. And I mean, I've picked up so much from this conversation. And I know that anybody that's watching this has been helped immensely. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Menza.
They're so rich,
Yeah.
so much to pour out of your own cup.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for pouring into the cups of others.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So that wraps up our episode, Permission to Grieve. And I'm sure you've all walked away with the sense of the importance that healing carries, in the sense that you need to process that pain. Otherwise, you may end up bleeding on people, on things that didn't cut you, if you leave it unhealed, if you leave it unchecked, if you leave it unfiltered. Like we say, conversations here are filtered through faith, because faith makes things possible, no matter how hard they are. I'm the Urban Evangelist, and do not forget to catch this episode on Radio Christian Voice, and do catch the whole video upload on our YouTube platforms. That's the Urban Evangelist, and that's Radio Christian Voice. Do like, do subscribe, and of course, leave your comments in the section. Much love. Catch us again next week.